Hi, I'm going to go through what is the best way of being able to study for the ISACA CISA exam. This is based on my experiences studying for different exams. So hopefully you can take this advice, customize it to what works for you. I'd like to just mention a disclaimer that the study plan offers strategic advice based on best practices, but you may set your own pace dependent on your background. The way that I always say is try and decide when you're going to do your exam. Set that date. That gives you something to work towards, and then work backwards to map out how much time you spend on each study phase. This is a customizable guide. It's not a one size fits all. And your success will really depend on consistent effort and practice with questions and answers. And do note, this video is not officially endorsed by ISACA, and the following advice doesn't guarantee a passing score. Always refer to the official ISACA exam guide and resources. So what do I recommend? Well, I really recommend that you use the ISACA official study guide, and you can purchase it from isaca.org. That's really the guide that you should be studying from, and you could choose to use other resources as well, but that is the most valuable resource. ISACA also has a Q&A database, which is just brilliant. It's questions and answers, and you can turn it on in learning mode so you can understand why a particular answer was correct or why another one was not right. So really, really valuable, and I couldn't imagine passing without it. And then there's official ISACA training that's available through ISACA. There's an ISACA chapter that's near you that probably is doing ISACA training, as well as ISACA authorized training centers. So I divide my study in two phases, and phase one is all about mastering the concepts, building a strong foundational knowledge, and really understanding what I call the ISACA mindset. You might like to start in this sequence with domain 2, which really kind of sets the foundation around governance and management, and then working your way to studying domain 1, 4, 5, and then 3. But you can order it as you see best fits your requirements. What do I mean by the ISACA mindset? For each concept, read, identify, differentiate, and connect with it. Practice thinking like an ISACA examiner. Create notes and master charts, and I'm going to show you how you do that. These are my most useful way of being able to pass exams. And I have to tell you, I've passed every single ISACA exam that I've attempted. So I really think this is a good technique. And this helps me. I read the study guide a couple of times, and every time I read it, I summarize those key points so that I can rapidly review those on a daily basis. I'm also a huge fan of flashcards. I'm going to show you the app that I like best. You might have one that works better for you, and that's absolutely fine. I find that I haven't got enormously good concentration. And so for me, I love flashcards because they live on my phone. I can take 5-10 minutes while I'm getting ready for work, drinking my coffee at the end of the day. I just find it a really, really simple way to constantly be revising. So I really recommend flashcards, and I'll show you those too. And then quick self notes. After class, write short summaries. So if you're doing an ISACA live class, write short summaries at the end of the day. I know that you're tired, but it's the best time to really consolidate learning and make that time as valuable as possible for you. There's a real difference in the way that you listen when you're doing a training course. There's active and passive learning. Active learning means you're actually keeping yourself engaged, and you're doing that by actively taking notes, drawing mind maps, or even teaching someone else. I always say that if you really understand a concept, then you can actually explain it to someone else. That's when you test, do I really understand symmetric encryption or asymmetric encryption? Because you can explain it to someone else. Passive learning is not as effective as using these kind of techniques where you're actively writing down your notes, you're doing questions and answers, you're teaching back to someone. So what are LDR notes? They're learn, digest, recall. So you learn while you're reading, during your course, while you're training. Digest is you're rewriting them in your own words in a concise, structured, and logical manner. People sometimes ask for my LDR notes, but those are the way that I think. So you should be writing your own notes because you're going to remember them so much better. I'm going to show you mine, but it really is best if you create your own. Recall is using those notes as your own personal recap tool during revision, and I do that a lot. It really helps me. These are custom condensed notes, and they're organized by domain, topic, key point, and often, when I'm working my way through the questions and answers, I know which areas I'm weak in, and that's what's going to appear in my LDR notes. And they're written in your own words because they help build memory hooks. And they should focus on the areas where you're weak or topics that reoccur in the Q&A questions and you're not quite getting them right. Master charts are really useful for people that are visual. I use them a little less because I'm not terribly visual myself, but for folks that are using things like flow charts and comparison tables, they really work very well. You might use them for relationships between frameworks or processes or life cycle models, and they can be really helpful for you for quick recall and visual reinforcement, and that you can draw those pictures. Really effective for visual learners. Here's an example, for instance, of how you might use master charts versus notes. So for instance, if you're studying business continuity, right, different types of sites, you can have hot sites, cold sites, warm sites. In your notes, you might have that simply jotted down. But in a master chart format, you would have it in a table. Sometimes I combine these two formats just because that's the way that I learn. And there are no wrong answers here. If it works for you and it's helping you remember things, then that's good. So what kind of tools do I use? I actually like tech a lot, so I use a lot of tech tools. If physical paper works for you, it's been shown that when you write things down, it really, really helps you remember things. My personal favorite is GoodNotes. I actually use a Apple Pencil and I write my notes down, and it'll actually you can actually convert it in GoodNotes from written notes to typed notes, so that you can read them more easily. I really love that because it shows, when you're writing, even if you're digitally writing, you're much more likely to remember things. Anki is my favorite app. I'm going to show that to you. The other thing that's really interesting, I think, is when you drive to work, some of that time you're just sitting in traffic, right? So if you can use voice memos, like for instance, you're having a real problem remembering the different types of business continuity sites, you could simply create voice memos, your own little recording that you play in the morning. So every evening you're kind of creating those recordings and you're listening to yourself. Very, very effective at helping you remember. You might also use Excel or Google Sheets to actually kind of track the domains that you've covered, grade yourself on strength, know where you're going to focus. If there are particular technical areas, perhaps you don't have a really good technical background around things like firewalls, then YouTube is brilliant, right? YouTube is really, really good at explaining concepts. I also use Gen AI, by the way, for understanding different concepts as well, having a lovely little chat with ChatGPT. Now, one of the things that are really important is remembering that consistency is key. Sometimes people think, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reserve all of Saturday. I'm going to study on Saturday because I really don't have time during the week because I'm on client sites. Studying 1 hour a day is just so much better than cramming in 7 hours on Saturday. It's a little bit like working out, right? You could work out for 7 hours on Saturday, be totally exhausted. We all know that's not as effective as working out 1 hour, 4 days a week. So even though it's difficult, even if you're just using your flashcards, your study notes, you're doing it while you brush your teeth, My husband always laughs at me. I quite often do it while I'm brushing my teeth, read my study notes. So that's, fit it in the time that you have. So really get over that weekend myth. Don't rely only on weekends to study. It's that regular effort that makes a difference, even if it's only an hour a day. Really the power of revision, right? Plan to revise each domain twice at least before each exam, right? Start with a study guide. That ISACA official study guide is absolutely invaluable. Work your way through it at least 2 times, creating your cheat sheets, your flashcards, so that you've got all of that review information there, your audio files. And sometimes when you're doing those exam questions, you really learn the content, the content, but what you have to do is really familiarize yourselves with ISACA's terminology and understanding how the question is being asked. So very often you'll have questions with, and they often put it in bold, most effective, best control, primary objective. Try and understand the intent of the question. So when you're looking at the question, ask yourself, what is the examiner trying to ask here? And then look at the words that are in bold on the question. And very often what I do when I'm working my way through the question is I use a process of elimination, right? So they have the answers there, and I look at it and I go, okay, definitely not 1, definitely not 3. Now I've got it down to 2 and 4, right? B and C. How do I eliminate those 2? And remember when you're studying to use multiple modes, right? Read the book, but record yourself too. Write things down. Do lots of testing, Q&A, flashcards. That really works for me. I find that really useful. So try that, and explaining to other folks as well, concepts. So the final week before the exam, do 2 full-length mock exams. Review your cheat sheets and your flashcards daily. Sleep, hydrate, rest well. I've often seen people not make it through the exam just because they were so anxious. So I often say to people, don't tell people that you're going to do the exam. That way you're not going to worry about people asking you, have you passed? If you have not passed, just book that. What's the worst that can happen? So if you fail, you have to redo it again. Bit of an expensive thing, but you'll be okay. But definitely don't stress yourself out. Try and stay calm. During the last week or 2, you shouldn't be studying new material. Sometimes I don't follow that rule. Only review your study sheets. And make sure you book your exam well in advance. It does get quite full, and so you want to make sure that you're doing that. So let's show you a couple of the resources that I talked about. So this is actually Anki app, and I really like Anki app. You can see I've logged into it, and I use it quite a lot for exams that I'm working my way through. And here we see some cards that I've actually created. Every time you come across something that you don't know in the Q&A database in your study, you can just enter a new card here, and then you can say, okay, what are the business continuity sites that you can have, for instance, and he could give you answers. Once you filled the sets, you could therefore go in, you can see one that I filled in before, and when you're ready, you can actually click on review. And remember, you can do this while you're having your coffee, in the break times at work. You click on review, and you could see, okay, what must be maintained when collecting digital evidence and chain of custody. So I flip through these cards every morning, at lunchtime, in the evening. It really, really helps me pass these exams. The other thing I want to show you is what cheat sheets look like. So this is an example of a cheat sheet I created for myself studying for the CISA exam. So an example here might be that we have the I've meant to put a disclaimer at the top, right? This is not a comprehensive guide. This is just my personal study guide, and I've outlined here are the key topics that I'm focusing on in domain 1, things like the audit process. What is the audit charter? Here's some risk concepts. Here are the different types of controls that you might have, types of audits. And so as I read my study guide, I'm creating these notes. And remember, it's much more effective if you're writing these notes. And then if you're using something like GoodNotes, you can then convert it into typing if you like. I just find it easier to read later, and you can see, here are the cat tools, right? And remember, very often ISACA asks you things like, which technique is best, for instance, so I've made a note of that. And so I'm going to then take these study notes that I've created in some of these key areas and convert it into flashcards. Well, I'm going to wish you best of luck in your exam. I'm sure you will do very, very well. Hopefully these techniques you will find useful. And remember, stay calm and work your way through, and you will definitely pass in the end.